basketball has saved my life. Just looking at myself from probably the rest of my family's trajectory. And there's a lot of males in my family who played sports. And, that's really all I knew is sports and played everything growing up. But the basketball has shaped some of my most sensitive and personal relationships today that I have, my business relationships as well. So it's really taken me across the world. Yes, in short, I don't know what I would do without basketball. I mean, we've had a lot of triumphs and a lot of major losses that come from basketball, stemming all the way back to, my childhood, losing teammates and different things like that. So it's all uniquely been intertwined. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy to think about.
So why don't you paint us a picture of South Los Angeles and losing your high school? What did those years teach you, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Inglewood, California, basically playing sports my whole life. Family, pretty much has been there. I would say it's the typical stories of lower middle class, right above the poverty line story. Parents working super hard, helped my sister and I to, have a better life than they did. Come from a really loving family. And then obviously outside, there's just, being a product of your environment. But I was one of the fortunate ones because basketball, and I was pretty good at basketball at a young age that I was able to play for, better AAU teams, that I was able to go on trips earlier in my life, or, play on teams where I didn't have to just go outside and really just be outside all day, every day, and then have anything else to do. I was always pretty much playing sports. So you got a little of that, but you see how it really shaped a lot of the friends that I grew up with who, you still have communication with today. See how them not having something to hold on to, or not having, both their parents in the household has really impacted them. Lusinger was a really interesting school. It's in the South Bay, and it's in Lawndale, California. Lusinger is the school that I call, like if you get kicked out of any other school in LA, like Lusinger will accept you with open arms. So we had it was a bunch of different kind of mix of, ethnicities and races. And when I first got there, it was a pretty violent school, I would say, had, race riots and different things like that at that time, until we got a new principal who really cleaned up the school, but it wasn't predominantly known for sports. And so it was just kind of the homeschool to the people in the area. But, I made lifelong relationships, at that school. And, my wife went to Lusinger, as well. And so a bunch of people that are in my life today is people that I met at Lusinger. So it's been, so it's a place, it's home for me. It's home for me for sure.
Yeah. And so I think at Lusinger is one of the major milestones that kind of led you to Easwell as well, right? You and Russell lost Kelsey Bars third in high school. How did that grief experience shape how you think about death and death care?
It was my first time really experiencing it where I could understand what was happening. I lost my grandfather when I was about 6, I would say. I lost my grandfather at 6. So that happened, but I was so young that I couldn't really process what was happening. And when we lost Kelsey, I was, 13, 14. And it was a shock. It was a culture shock to see how it impacted our community. It's well known that Kelsey was a top 50 player coming out of Lusinger in our community. That typically doesn't happen. Russell and I were playing basketball with Kelsey earlier that day at LA Southwest College. If you played basketball in LA in the 2000s, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you played at Southwest. It was an open run. So everybody that was somebody in LA was there playing. If you win, you stay on the middle court. That particular day, we stayed on the middle court all day. We didn't lose a game that whole day. And Russell and I ended up leaving at the same time to get dropped off back home. And then we later get the call that Kelsey passed out, on the court. And shortly after, he passed away. And so it was a huge impact, on our community, and really just trying to process that. That was the first time I really had an experience where, it really shocked me in grieving. Right? I didn't really know how to grieve. You see everybody kind of crying around you. I didn't really know how to grieve, but I think his impact is what really, stay with me today. We wear our kind of KB3 bands, every day to show support and remembrance to who he is. But had a huge impact on me as a person. And I think that was like the driving factor that really changed the course of, Russ's life, in some respect. And then obviously, myself as well.
Yeah, I read somewhere that there was such like the community almost was like rallying around him to be the one that was like the model to go out and be the guy, right? Be him outside. And after he passed, it almost pushed like Russell and you to like be better,
Yeah.
to kind of carry on his legacy.
Yeah. I would say like personally, that was just like a personal kind of goal that we had is just like,
Mhm.
how do we honor Kelsey? I think our high school coach and now one of my closest friends, Reggie Morris Jr., he did a great job of really honing that energy into us. It's like, yeah, we're playing hard for something bigger than us, right?
Yeah.
So that was really the message that it was. I wouldn't say like the community was like pushing Russell and I, but I would say for the next couple of years, we were like the two best players on our team.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of carried that, energy. And I think, and I said this in Russell's story, I think Kelsey passing really lived on. Like it's like Russell took that energy and ran with it.
Yeah.
Russell was always energetic and emotional, but Kelsey he was a bit more emotional, and energetic than I would say Russell was. And it's like Russell kind of just took that energy and he ran with it. And opportunity and working hard has obviously worked out for him in his career. But again, I would say, we try to play for something bigger than us. And I think we take that approach to what we do in business now. It's not only about kind of what we want. It's like, hopefully we're building something that's bigger than us and has, impact on as many people as we can is really our goal.